Whoever initiated the meeting.
Start recording.
Excellent.
At least I pressed the button.
It is recording.
Okay, then we have to figure out how to keep it and not lose it. Well, we are doing our very best. It says recording. It's recording. All right.
Yep, it started. It says so here on our page too.
Very good.
So if you want me to start it
Why
off,
don't you
Tessa?
get started, Craig?
Yeah, okay, that's very kind of you. Okay, well, thank you very much, Tessa, and the rest of the staff who will introduce one another from Sheila Kuehl's office. We'll, like we talked about on an email exchange, we'll start with very brief introductions. My name is Craig Galante. I am the unanimously elected Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council representative for the CAG, or Community Advisory Group, for the health study and 30-year resident of Porter Ranch. And I will turn it over to Brian Allen, a fellow CAG member.
I am Brian Allen. I am a member of the Granada Hills North Neighborhood Council. I am also their representative to the CAG. I guess that's enough for this particular situation. Thank you.
Brian, name a name so we can keep it moving, please.
Oh, Mike.
Mike Benedetto, past president of the United Chamber of Commerce, current president of Granada Hills South Neighborhood Council, one of the original members of the CAG. Gabe?
Thank you. I'm Gabriel Callan, and I'm the president of Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council. And Brandy.
Hi, I'm Brandy Grace, a member of the Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council and an elected alternate to the CAG. Turn it to Dr. Nordella.
Hi, I'm Dr. Nordella. I'm primary care physician, 35 years practicing. I was medical director at Porter Ranch Quality Care at Ground Zero during the blowout.
I'll go with Andrew next. You're muted, Andrew. We'll move on. We'll come back to you. How about Patty?
I'm Patty Glick. I'm an at-large member of the Community Advisory Group for the Health Study.
Lori?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Avazian. I'm an at-large member of the Community Advisory Group for the CAG.
And Andrew's still working on unmuting.
I'm good. Sorry, it's been too long since using Teams. Andrew Crown, CAG member representing Northridge West Neighborhood Council and co-founder, president of Environmental Health Research.
I think that's everyone on the CAG that's present. So go ahead, Tessa, if you want to go with your team.
Sure. Elon, do you want to start?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and I'm glad we could get together at this time. My name is Elon Schultz. I'm the Senior Health Deputy for Supervisor Kuehl. I cover issues related to our departments of mental health and public health. I'll pass it to Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria John Castillo. I have many responsibilities, one of which is I am on an environmental team, public works, parks, etc. So I wear a lot of hats. Tessa?
Hi there. I am. I've met several of you. I am Tessa Charnofsky. I work as a Supervisor Kuehl's district director in the West Valley and Mountain Communities area. And Danielle.
Hi all, Danielle Zapata. For the purposes of this meeting, I help the supervisor with planning. I also do social services. I think that's everyone. Oh, Blake, I'm sorry, go ahead.
All good, all good. Good afternoon, everybody. Blake Clayton. I am a field deputy working out of the West Valley Mountain Communities office with Tessa Charnofsky. Thank you for having me today.
All right, Craig, I think you have a PowerPoint you wanted to share.
I do. Becky, if you want to quickly introduce yourself while I cue it up. Becky, you're still muted. Okay. Gabe, you want to introduce Becky?
Sure, Becky Levesque, and she is the chair of Safety Committee of Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council and on the council itself.
Great. Okay, so I think we've introduced everybody. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Supervisor Kuehl's staff for being willing to meet with us. Special acknowledgement to Blake, who was so cordial and quick to get back to me in coordinating this. So thank you very much. We do have a presentation, and can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So let's rock. And that didn't work. Bear with me. I am not. Okay, this is what I need. Almost there. Almost there. Okay, so here's our agenda. We just did the introductions. I want to go over this, and if anybody else has any other agenda items they want to add, now would be a good time to describe it. This was provided to everybody in advance. Hopefully you've had a chance to read it. We'll spend hopefully less than 20 minutes doing a background on the Aliso Canyon, as well as the concerns the community has and why there's a problem and no confidence. And we definitely want to spend some time talking about our recommendations and how we can collaborate. Plenty of time for Q&A and then an open discussion about next steps. Does this work for everybody? And does anybody have any other agenda items?
Looks good to me.
Kuehl staff, we're good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, looks fine to us too. Thanks.
Great, excellent, thank you. All right, so some background. So for 118 days, 4 months, there was this unabated exposure from the blowout well. And it's important to understand that this is unabated. There's no filters of what's coming up out of the earth and into the atmosphere and then eventually showering into our community. It is what is referred to as unscrubbed gas and all of the constituents that come up from this well. Please bear in mind that this is an abandoned oil field, that after the oil extraction that was easy was done, it was then used in the early 70s to capture methane for use in our homes and businesses. It is a natural void in the earth. There are not, hermetically sealed stainless steel tanks down there. This is Mother Nature trying to contain this massive amounts of gas under over 3,000 PSI, which is very high. So what happened in this disaster? It became the largest methane blowout and multi-toxin release exposure in U.S. history. It's not often talked about that way, but for reference, it was 200 times greater in volume than the Deepwater Horizon disaster. Over 8,000 homes had to relocate for about 6 months, and there was 1.2 million residents that were impacted by this. And as our ace Patty points out, that this is the 1.2 million residents far exceeds what was only in Catherine Barger's district, but now was also in the former SD3 that Sheila Kuehl oversaw. So this did impact her prior stakeholders as well as her inherited ones that she acquired, and your guys' responsibility as well. And you're starting to make yourself present and aware and known. By the way, I want to point out that everyone on this call, except the staff, Kuehl staff, in this picture, we live or work. Probably we could point to where our homes are in this picture. That's how close we are to this. So to give you a little more background, in February of 19, $25 million was set aside in a settlement between the state, city, and county of LA from SoCalGas. And that was under the administration of public health to administer a health study. They formed 2 groups, a scientific oversight committee, referred to as SOC, and the group you're speaking with today, the Community Advisory Group, or CAG. The CAG has met since August of 2019, so we've been together for roughly 30 months. Have you all met with Department of Public Health and gotten a briefing? I see some nods of the heads, yes. So the majority of you have.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So, shortly after the CAG got together, we knew we had to assemble our thoughts process about how we were going to go about this. So we came up with 3 pillars because we really took seriously our role to be advisors for what is in reality a very highly educated and informed community about the Aliso Canyon blowout. So we created 3 pillars, and we use this to really keep track of all actions and sometimes inactions of where the health study was going. And the pillars are, is it community-centric? Is the decision or the path science-based? And lastly, and very, very importantly, is it absent political influences or agenda? And the reason we came up with these is because it was core to the community who had a very strong distrust of not only DPH, but all the regulators because of what had happened since the blowout. We overwhelmingly felt unprotected. And if you didn't have these 3 pillars, the community would not trust the path forward. And most importantly, they would not have confidence in the delivery of the study's findings. So this is how we operate. So let's start with community centricity. In the 30 months that the CAG has been together, and actually before that too, the community and the CAG was very, very crystal clear on what we medically needed and what we morally deserved in a health study. And we do mean that morally. I mean, we were assaulted, right, by the negligence of an operator. We were dumped with known and unknown chemicals and toxins that they should feel morally obligated to disclose what they did to us. That has not happened. The LA Times, and this is to help appreciate the centricity, the consumer, the community's wishes, and what we, the CAG, have sort of solidified our positions on. And I want to read to you a front page article. This incident did not make the front page very often after the blowout, but way back, way after the blowout in this past October. And the link is there if anybody wants to read the full article. I want to illustrate to you what a community member went through and her family. The leak forced Rana, her husband, and their 1- and 3-year-old sons to leave their dream home at Porter Ranch and move into a cramped apartment in Westwood. That was very common, by the way. People had to downsize and living conditions were very, very difficult. But things got really bad for them. Her husband was diagnosed with testicular cancer in the months after the blowout, and Azimi herself was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2019, and she underwent a double mastectomy. She's not alone. There's a lot of cancers that we hear about from our friends and family. This last line is really critically important. And again, that foundation to where the CAG was operating about community centricity and science-based. She hopes that the health study will identify the harms of exposures and allow doctors to advise families on preventative care. That's why we stuck together. In our path to get to the science-based and to get to the truth and to answer the questions the community desperately wanted, we began keeping track of what we requested. They weren't brought to us. What we requested, the fundamental basis for the study that we presented to DPH and we also presented to the SOC. Now, this chart is represented in months of delay. Remember, we were together for 30 months. And for instance, one of the primary things that we kept requesting and that they be on the table for that proper scientific discovery was ongoing air monitoring. That was funded 39 months ago, funded. Monies are there. And this is critically important because it would measure what we were exposed to post the blowout and even to today. That has not materialized. We asked from our very beginning, we're together 30 months from the very beginning, 29 months ago, we put on the table, we must get the chemical list of exposure from Southern California gas. 29 months ago. Turns out that Department of Public Health refuses to subpoena. We'll get into that. A CBC study, 27 months ago, Dr. Nordella presented a preliminary finding of CBC studies, which is complete blood count, and we can go into that in the Q&A. And the repeated response from public health was, this is very serious and needs to be investigated further. We agreed. We encouraged it. It has been 27 months, over 2 years, and we're still waiting for that study to come through. They have the data. Fugitive emissions are ongoing. We brought that to their attention 27 months ago. The list goes on and on and on. By the way, the asterisks are 100% in public health's control. The ones non-asterisk, like the air monitoring, is in the AQMD's control. Okay? Things are not well. When you have an average of 25 months in delay, think if you went to your physician and you were very worried about symptoms that you thought might be cancer related, and your doctor keeps putting you off for 25 months for test results or an investigation, you would have long ago found a new doctor. Let's talk about the subpoena. It was the CAG that brought to Department of Public Health that they have a unique legal position to pierce the trade secret veil that our plaintiff attorneys, for those of us that are in a lawsuit, could not pierce because the SoCalGas, Sempra corporately, could say, we don't have to disclose it because it's protected by trade secret. However, if it's a public health issue, public health and the county supervisors have the ability to pierce this veil. Right here is the safety code, right here. So if anybody wants to look it up, the law is very clear. It supports the county to do so, but somewhere along the line, the county lacks the political will to do this to protect its own constituents and stakeholders. Now, DPH doesn't need the county to, Mike, can you mute, please? It doesn't need the county, doesn't need the county's permission. They could act on their own, but they didn't, and we'll get to that in a minute. The fastest and surest way to get to this data is through the county or DPH, and it is woefully delayed and absolutely critical for a health study that is soon going to begin. So what did the CAG do when the Department of Public Health repeatedly declined to subpoena to get this incredibly valuable scientific information? Well, we pressed all the buttons we possibly could. We met with Supervisor Barger, and most everybody on this call was in this meeting. And in October of 20, Barger said that she and Barbara Ferrer, the head of public health, both agreed that the study is worthless without this list. Barger went on to make two promises to us, that she would get the list from the gas company and that she would meet with us every 2 months because this was critically important to her and she knew it was important to this community. Neither of those two promises ever materialized despite our repeated requests for a follow-up meeting. We pushed another button. We went to our CD12 council member, John Lee, and we repeatedly requested, we had a meeting with him and we repeatedly requested in writing that a motion that we put out there for him to take to the city council to encourage the county or DPH to subpoena for this information to protect his own neighbors. He lives in Porter Ranch. We see him at the grocery store. We garnered seven neighborhood councils to unanimously agree that the county should take its full authority and use its subpoena power to tell us what we have been exposed to, what we morally deserved. We pushed another button. We started a petition that has over 2,500 signatures. DPH repeatedly declined to use its subpoena authority, although they had it. And when we simply asked the question, why? Why are you not protecting us? The response was attorney-client privilege. That's all they gave us. We pushed further. And then in a public meeting, they finally said, despite having the legal authority, we are deferring the actions of the subpoena to the supervisor's office. Remember our pillars? Community centricity, scientific based, and political agenda. So now look what happened. Getting the chemicals that we were exposed to is no longer science-based. It became a political football and thrown back to the supervisor's office to resolve the legal matter. Now it's political, it's no longer science. Complete violation of what we have been advocating for 30 months. To add insult to injury, because we are injured, I want to show you, this is a screen grab from Public Health's own website about the Environmental Health Division, who oversees the health study. This is their mission. The health study strives to promote health and quality of life by identifying, preventing, and controlling harmful environmental factors in Los Angeles County. That sounds pretty good. That's what you would want. Goes on. The mission of the environmental health is to assess environmental conditions and reduce exposures to health risks, and to educate the public on sources of environmental risk so that they are empowered to protect themselves, their families, and their communities. Let's do this really quick one more time because that's how important it is. Identify, educate, and empower the people and their public's health. That did not happen in this blowout. They didn't subpoena the information. They didn't educate us on what we were exposed to, and they are not doing anything to protect us.
Craig, I just want to call your attention to the time.
Thank you, Brady. Okay, we put aside 20 minutes. We might go. Okay, I'm going to push really hard through all this. Thank you, Brady. So, what are our chief concerns? We already hit the refusal to subpoena very hard. The other one is everything is pointed towards doing what's called an environmental risk health assessment. This is fundamentally flawed in the study. Don't take our word for it. Let's look at California Council for Science and Technology, CCST. It's a think tank that advises Sacramento. Here's what they said. The air monitoring that was done in and around the blowout is unusable for a health risk assessment. Some of the reasons why are the following. Monitoring wasn't done in the early days of the blowout. Here's a killer. Only 21 or 37% of the known toxins emitted from underground gas storage, that's what UGS stands for. So they know what usually comes out of these facilities, and only 21 or 37% were monitored. Not only that, the perpetrator took the lead role in capturing air monitoring. SoCalGas was in charge of the air monitoring. And what did they do? They set some benzene monitors at a trigger level 20 times higher than what the Cal EPA says is safe. We'll get into that in a minute. They also didn't follow up on all the fugitive emissions that are ongoing even today. And we pled for these things. So let's go back up to the most important one on this, highlighted in red. Why would the perpetrator set levels 20 times higher for benzene? It could be, the benzene levels were set at 20, and it would trigger the sample canister. Benzene allowable from Cal EPA is 1. So it was 20 times higher. So benzene could have been in our neighborhoods, in our driveways, in our homes at 10, 15, all day long, and the trigger never went off. Why would they do that? Well, because SoCalGas knows what is coming out of that well unabated. Because in 2019, following up to an emissions leak that was up there, the AQMD, and this is their report, link is provided. The AQMD identified let's go back up here, the underground storage reservoir. This is prior to treating the gas, right? Unscrubbed, what was coming out of the well has a benzene level 7,700 times greater than what the Cal EPA says is okay. Let that sit for a moment. 7,000 times greater. And this is what was coming up out of the earth and into our community. Punchline, 6.5 years later, we still do not know what we were exposed to. Now I want to turn it over to Dr. Nordella. As he introduced himself, he was ground zero at the urgent care right here in Porter Ranch. He was 3 miles dead south of the blowout.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, I just want to talk about really quickly is to go through synergistic toxicity. Most of you probably already know what that is. But I look at it as an example. If you are taking prescription A and you go to another doctor and he writes you prescription B, you take it to the pharmacist. Pharmacist has computerized all of the information and will tell you if there's a toxic effect between taking the two medications. So to hammer home the point, if we don't have these toxins, how can we then notify a patient that there might be a toxic effect? So there was many known and unknown chemicals. So let's talk about a few of the ones that I'm concerned with as known. It's toxic crude oil. So toxic crude oil was identified very early as a black soot. Okay, it was actually examined by the Department of Public Health in mid-December 2015. A letter was drafted by Cynthia Harding, I believe, which was the acting medical director. And they did a very kind of short-term analysis, found out that it was consistent with crude oil. From there, they sent a letter documented on March 6, 2016 to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors and told them that this was toxic crude oil that was being spread in the community. And absolutely nothing was done. The community was not notified. There was no potential mitigation procedures that were put in place. Then we go on to particulate matter, and there's all kinds of particulate matter. We won't get into that, but the point of the particulate matter is that they are aware of the particulate matter, and particulate matter can carry thousands of chemicals that are toxic to the body. Okay, but no constituents and no analysis again done, including heavy metals. Then we go to the one that they actually did identify, which is a concern to me, is acrolein. And as a little sidebar point to acrolein, this is a chemical that was used in World War I in chemical warfare. It was present in the Finding the Latent study in 5 or 6 area elementary school classrooms, not the cookeries. And 96% of the cohort of the study's homes, is 103 homes, it was found as well. The excuse of the acrolein finding was then inappropriately and non-scientifically dismissed to cooking oil, and again inappropriate. Next slide, please. Next slide, Craig.
There you go.
Thank you. 2 other chemicals of concern is that of formaldehyde. Formaldehyde, you've all heard about the bloody noses. Formaldehyde, as I was in a dissecting lab for cadavers, they embalm the bodies. So there's a higher incidence of hemopoietic cancers in that occupational specialty. And as a drying agent was probably one of the causations of the bloody noses in the community along with others. And then we talk about benzene. So benzene was first identified by UCLA on the countertops in homes of 2 out of 7 of the homes, and DPH was alerted to that fact. And so they expanded the study appropriately so to the 103 cohorts and then a control group. And they looked at those homes, but they didn't study and actually do an analysis for benzene on the countertops, despite the fact that UCLA had alerted them to this fact. What they ended up doing is they ignored it, and then they lied to the community in a public letter that stated that we tested and it was negative. So again, inappropriate. We look at the benzene. The benzene level was never measured in the crude oil. So when you see these numbers, there's unaccountable benzene that we'll get to in a second. And if we look at the WHO's position is there's no safe level of benzene. Benzene has been studied for years and years and is definitely noted carcinogen. CalPA sets their limits to 1 part per billion per 8-hour exposure. Next slide, please. So DPH funded a study March through September 2016. Now, keep in mind, this was after the field was discharged, non-pressurized. It was down, it was non-functioning. And they did grab samples. The AQMD did grab samples, and they did 40 of them. And over 50%, 21 of them, had an average benzene level of 2.2 parts per billion. Now, as we know that this is definitely toxic at 1 part per billion. Was this ever addressed? Unfortunately, it was not. Next slide, please. Then we come to the front page of the LA Times again, Sunday, October 3rd, and this is by Michael Jarrett. Michael Jarrett is a fairly well-noted professor of environmental health at UCLA. And he states here, he says, there's just isn't real great scientific literature on what the length of exposure can mean for the formation of long-term health effects. And my question to Dr. Jarrett would be, is that exposure of what? We really don't know what we're exposed to, again, because of, as Craig addressed, the issue of not filing the subpoena. He goes on to say going back now and reconstructing the exposure is really complicated and uncertain task. Now, if they're looking at creating another environmental exposure, it's been done. It's been challenged. The numbers even of the chemicals that they did find have been challenged by other scientific institutions and have found to be somewhat fictitious, and certainly we can't rely on. Now, it's my guess, that being that I was a SOC member at one time, that UCLA probably will obtain the contract to do the study. Again, that's speculation, and I'll state that. But if they do, he's already telling us and possibly other scientific agencies that this would be an unreliable process to address the question, next slide, of the community. And to accurately, scientifically, and morally assess the health status of the exposed community, of which they have repeatedly requested, you definitely need to do long-term clinical evaluations. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Craig.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll have time for Q&A, so now I really want to push through this. So what you just heard from the doctor, the overwhelming wishes of the community, the RFP as it stands today does not require clinical evaluations. This is not acceptable. In fact, the precursor to the RFP was a goals and priority document that was published in the fall. So I'm going to back up a moment. So before the RFP went out, the community was polled and asked for a response. Well, it was very consistent response. The CAG unanimously rejected it. The area NCs rejected it. It was rejected by over 400 community members in writing. And then most recently, thanks to Brandy Grace, who brought it to the North Valley Democratic Club, they rejected the RFP based upon this knowledge. So what is going on here? DPH ignored the advice of the CAG for 30 months, but it also refused to include in the RFP the overwhelming demands of this harmed community. This led to an absolute confidence breakdown. All of these factors were leading up to this. And in conservancy of time, I'm not going to go into a full explanation of this slide. However, the overwhelming orange is not confident in DPH and the path that they're on for the health study. It is overwhelmingly negative, having no confidence, including unanimous votes by 5 area and adjacent NCs to the field itself. The community is not confident, nor do they trust what's happening. Clinical evaluations are not an option, held so strongly that without a study based on primarily clinical evaluations, with knowledge of the exposed elements, which could easily be procured with a subpoena, any logical person, as well as the CAG and the community members we speak to, can only conclude the following: that the DPH and the SOC path is not science-based, but politically driven. The design of the study in the RFP is intended to whitewash the short and long-term health impacts of the worst methane leak in US history, all orchestrated under a politically captured Department of Public Health. There does not appear to be any other logical explanation. And if you need any more grounding, remember that woman that is holding the hand of her 3-year-old and the 1-year-old on her hip as her husband is packing up their car so they could flee Porter Ranch because they don't know what they've been exposed to. And this is what she told the LA Times reporter. Are my kids going to get cancer? Am I going to be alive to see them through it? If not for our generation, it's going to help the people for future generations. This is in regards to what she wants out of the health study, and so do we. Who's responsible for this mess that you inherited? Let's move away from just department titles. Let's move to people that are making these decisions. And whether you guys wanted it or not, Sheila Kuehl is now at the top of the pyramid, along with Catherine Barger, because this was her district before, and public health reported into her. The 4 people that are absolutely in charge of this health study are Barbara Ferrer, Buntu Davis, Paul Simon, and Charlene Contreras. So let's put names and faces to why the situation is the way it is. That's only fair. I don't mean that as harsh. I don't mean that as rude. It's been 6.5 years. Okay. We've done enough whining, we've done enough complaining, but we hope we are fact-based and laid it out for you where things are. We also have recommendations because we always agreed we're not just going to complain. We're going to put things on the table that resolve the issues. Here are our 5 recommendations that I would like to discuss next. Append the health study RFP so that it is a requirement that it be a primary long-term patient-centric clinical study. Doesn't mean they can't do the other things too, but the primary investigation needs to be clinical study. The county, Sheila Kuehl, right now today, could subpoena the gas company for the exposures. That should be, that is on the table for us still. Cancer study, we'll talk about that another time. Full transparency, please note, the CAG has been sidelined. We have been put on hiatus. We want full transparency to the CBC study that's 27 months in delay. We want full transparency to the RFP process of selecting the research company, the research firm, so that we know it's independent and objective. And we just need exposure to where the money's going. Okay, we've been asking for that for 24 months. And an investigation of the ongoing exposures. These are our recommendations. These are 5 things that we think we can collaborate on and move forward. Okay. Thank you very much for listening to us. We went about 5 minutes over. We got 20 minutes, and let's do Q&A and discussion and next steps if that works for everybody. Let's open it up, Q&A. Who's got a question?
Looks like Elon has a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for walking us through that. That was, frankly, it was really impressive and really well put together. I do have a couple of clarifying questions because there were just 2 things that stuck out that I want to make sure I understand correctly. But I also want to say right now that unfortunately I do have to get off at 3. So if the rest of the conversation goes late, I apologize now that I do have to get off at 3. But so 2 quick questions. One is, in the slide that you recently showed, Craig, it referenced $1.2 million that's been spent. What has that money been spent on? Because I can't think of what that figure represents offhand.
Incredibly vague. The community cannot say we saw $1.2 million worth of effort. A lot of it's got to do with paying consultants and advisors. There's been no heavy lifting, in our opinion, that justify the $1.2 million spending. You need to ask public health. We'd like to see the details.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like that figure came from public health, and that was their explanation of what they have spent so far.
It's from them. We asked for more detail, never got it. You should ask them the same question.
Okay.
Please copy us.
Okay. Well, okay. Yeah. I want to go back to a slide. It was actually something that was obliquely referred to in a slide, but not actually specified. You said that the CAG, multiple neighborhood councils, the North Valley Democratic Club, all rejected the goals and priorities of the health study RFP. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, correct. The goals and priorities led to the RFP.
The North Valley Dems Club was specifically the RFP. It wasn't about the goals and priorities because it just happened last week.
Got it. Okay. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. I'm assuming that the main issue here was that the RFP or the RFP after it was released and the goals and priorities did not specify that it should have or it required a clinical assessment. Is that it? I'm just wondering what about the goals, because I don't know the goals and priorities offhand. So I'm wondering what it was that was the issue.
The majority of it was the lack of the clinical evaluations. It was also very vague and unclear, didn't have enough substance to it. The RFP closed some gaps, but certainly not all of them. But Elon, clinical evaluation is our #1. It's a non-starter without clinical.
Okay, so I'm assuming the clinical evaluation this directly with DPH. I'm wondering what their response was when you basically, are saying you think clinical evaluations have to be a part of this RFP and the health study. What is their response?
Anyone else want to take that one?
Elon, this is Andrew. I'll take it. Their response is basically to defer, to kick the can to whatever firm they ultimately select to do the work. We don't want to put, we don't want to limit what kind of proposals we get. It'll be up to the researchers themselves to determine the path that they want to take. That's public health's response. And to that end, I want to point out, I'm sure all the staff members are aware of the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. That a little head nod or a thumbs up, everyone knows that major disaster. There is, from that disaster, the Gulf study, capital GULF. It is, in our opinion, the gold standard in a disaster of this kind and a look at the population and their effects. That study was for the exposure of toxic crude oil, simply put this way. If you helped us clean up and were exposed to the oil for 1 minute of one day or every day, we want to study the long-term effects of that exposure on your body. Substitute toxic crude oil for toxic crude oil and that message, that mission should have exactly been the goals and priorities of this health study, period. And I gave it to you in 30 seconds, not 2 years of belabored work. A health study like we want is already sitting out there in the world.
And do you have any sense of how much that Deepwater Horizon study is costing?
I don't, though I will tell you they did, the study consisted of some manner of in-person evaluation initially for those who could, phone interviews for those who couldn't. And quite honestly, I don't see why literally a mirrored study here that has an in-person evaluation, at least to begin, could not be done. And ultimately, I would defer to Dr. Nordella on his opinion of the frequency of in-person visits and actual, blood work and the like.
I think Brian wanted to say something, Patty, and then Randy. Be quick, guys.
Craig, can
Okay.
I just add one at the point? Craig?
Okay, doctor, your name was brought up first. Go ahead.
I apologize. I just want to add to the point he's asking the question. I think you have to look also at the makeup of the SOC. Scientific Oversight Committee was made up of probably 90% of PhDs, and they're going to be in the more mindset of doing an environmental study and not a clinical. I sat on the SOC as an MD, pushed for clinical. I pushed for other doctors to come on, pulmonologists, cardiologists, toxicologists, and that was ignored. So the reason you have a drafted RFP that has this verbiage in it, it comes from what they're comfortable with, which is totally understandable. The lack of insight was to mix it up and get an even number. So thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. I want to just address Elon's point, his question with regards to the 1.2 million. It should be known that, and by the way, I was a CFO for 40 years, and I have never been able to understand this comment. It was said by DPH, and I can tell you who said it, but it was said that, well, we didn't really spend 1.2 million because we earned $700,000 as it was sitting in the bank. That is such a horrendous statement that it really speaks of trying to completely mislead people and thinking that we're idiots. The fact is, if you spent 1.2 million, you spent 1.2 million. How did you spend it? We never did find that out.
Patty?
Okay, I went on the website for the Gulf study, and more than 3,500 persons who live within 60 miles of one of the study clinics that they had set up completed a comprehensive clinical research study examination. So they were physically looking at the people, they were testing their lung and neurological function, physiological measurements, additional collecting of biological samples, including blood samples, of course, and doing questionnaires. And often they went to people's homes. So the people who couldn't go there, they said, let's go to your house and do this. So there you go.
Elon, do you think we can collaborate on advocating for clinical evaluations?
So I'm not gonna give you an answer that you like, but I'm gonna give you the one that I can at this moment. And let me just say, one of the challenges here is that the RFP has been released. At this point now, because the RFP is released, are the only options, as I understand them, are basically to let the RFP process play out, see what bids and responses we get back, or to cancel the RFP. Let me be clear, that is a possibility. The departments, we do it on occasion. It is often very messy and it creates a whole lot of other red tape and challenges, but it can happen. I think, you know, what DPH has told us, so as you know, a lot of these issues are relatively new for our office. So I'm going to say off the top that all of us on this call appreciate this opportunity to hear your perspectives, and we're going to run back to both DPH and County Council to ask them hard questions. A lot of them have been raised by you, and in fact, I just got an email from Dr. Davis just now, because I already said we need to connect and we have some questions about the study. I'm assuming that if we went back to DPH right now, what they would probably tell us is, let's just see what the responses are, what the bids are, the RFP responses are, and see what the bidders propose, because it is quite possible that they propose clinical evaluations as part of their study. So, you know, you're asking, can we work together to advocate? And I'm not saying yes, because I'm not sure it's necessary. It's possible that the respondents will come back with a clinical evaluation component. What the SOC does with that, how they actually make a determination about which study proposal they think the county should move forward with, I don't know how that will play out. But what I can tell you right now is that I quite clearly hear both the frustration that you guys have and I also think that's a fair question. Why not make sure that we get clinical evaluations? Because, and actually, Dr. Nordella, the point that you just made about having, well, you didn't say it this way, but what I heard was too many PhDs on the SOC and not enough MDs. I work with way too many doctors all the time, of all types, and I hear what you're saying, and you're right. A PhD, especially like an epidemiologist or environmental health practitioner, is going to have a different perspective and ask different questions than an MD. So I would like a chance to go back to DPH and talk through with them, really, what happens if we don't end up with bidders who put forward clinical evaluation components to their health study? What do we do then? So that was a very long, convoluted answer. I hope it made sense. I'm basically just thinking about this as you're asking the question. I don't offhand know the timeline for the RFP or the SOC's deliberation and decision process. So I actually don't, and maybe you guys know better than we do, when the SOC is supposed to be making those decisions. My assumption is that it's not going to happen before the summer, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
That's about right. The bids are supposed to come in, I think, in March or April, mid-March, mid-April. So it's coming upon us very quick. Mm-hmm. I do want to point out to you, Elon, that in the RFP, the only requirement that I recall reading is that they have computer modeling to do health risk assessment based upon air measurements. So that in itself makes the reader believe, if I want this gig, I better come in spades that I can do health risk assessment, and clinical would not be high on the list because it's a job description, right? You tell them what they want to hear. So Elon, this issue needs to be pressed hard and now.
Craig, if I may add, I know other hands up, but I apologize for jumping ahead. Elon, one of the comments DPH made to us for a number of years was that they weren't going to be tied to a single research firm, a single researcher, because what the community had asked for was, clinical physical evaluations, mental health evaluations, potentially environmental, soil and plant evaluations, pet and animal evaluations, that the ability of a single researcher to do all of that was going to be very low. They told the community repeatedly that they would have the flexibility to bring in different people to do different things along the way. The RFP specifically enumerates they are issuing one single contract, period. Mm-hmm. So that is another, at least in my view, I think others will agree, another very fatal guardrail to the RFP in its current form. Thank you.
We only have 5 more minutes. Randy wants to ask a question.
Sorry,
so does Maria. Elon, go ahead.
I have one. Yeah, sorry, I have one more quick question. Do you guys know?
Hang on, Elon. Can the rest of you please extend beyond 3 o'clock? I have questions.
This is Maria. I have to leave at 3, and I do want to make a comment. If I could do that after Elon finishes discussing what he wants to.
Okay, Elon.
No, I'm asking. I think I'm about to ask a question that you have, Maria, which is the decision-making process for the RFP. My understanding is that it's the SOC that is going to be analyzing the RFP responses and then making a recommendation. Is that correct? Is it?
No. It was told to us from the very beginning, DPH would make the decision, and then the SOC would oversee the researchers and sort of like have discussions. But the selection process is completely hidden, and that is unacceptable to this community. We should have much more transparency. We understand confidentialities, so designate a few players from the community that see the process and can ensure that it's independent. Because if UCLA gets this gig, my eyebrows are way up and my radar is way up. We understand, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so there's no guarantee that DPH comes back to get input from the CAG about the RFP.
I think animals will fly across the sky before that happens.
That's unacceptable to us, and we asked for this repeatedly. Does that answer your question, Elon?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Maria?
Please, Maria, go ahead.
Actually,
okay.
that was going to be one of my questions. Also, I'm really familiar with RFP process. And I mean, obviously, we need to do a lot of due diligence on our part as a result of all the pertinent information that you have given us. But just to give DPH the benefit of the doubt here, and I have no idea, and that is that if in fact the RFP scope has specificity in terms of accepting one bid from one consultant, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are not precluded from subcontracting with various entities for various, expertise. In other words, but that has to be stated in the RFP, and I have no idea if it is. So we appreciate all of this information. Obviously, we know that this has been happening, but it has not been in our district, obviously. So now we want to take the time to digest what you have told us, go back to DPH, County Council, and really research all of this so that we can get totally up to speed to today. And then we want to come back and meet back with you. Excuse me, my voice is fading. And meet back with you.
We appreciate all the efforts that you guys are putting into this. We know this is new for your office and it's a lot to dump on you all at once. We understand it's a complicated issue. I'm happy to email it to your office, the resolution from the Dems Club. But on top of that, the last thing I wanted to ask is, in addition to the stuff with the RFP, would perhaps your office help us with the chemical list subpoena?
Okay, let us
So-
go back and talk to DPH and just get up to speed. And I understand your issue with the list. I don't know what the legal ramifications are. Obviously, we don't know.
Understood.
And we need to look at that.
You're willing to look at it for us?
Yeah.
When do we get back together?
I don't want to sound bureaucratic. We're like really busy. And this is going to really take time for us to really dive into all this and understand all the layers of all the issues. Is 30 days too long for you?
Yes.
For us to come back? Well,
of course it is, because the RFP is happening right now.
Well, okay, that was a stupid question, I guess. So I don't know. The RFP is, the bids are back. Did you say next month? March, April? Did I hear that?
Yeah, Patty was checking it, I think. Patty, you're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to find it. I know that it was an RFP. I just couldn't find, I was searching for it, and there is
All
a
right, we'll
chart.
email you. We'll email
Yeah,
you.
we'll email when we see it, but I do believe it was in March that they wanted the.
Well, actually, we could get that information and then we'll get back
Sure.
to you when we can meet back with you. Okay, as soon as possible.
So we should try to do 2 weeks. Let's try and put a stake in the ground in 2 weeks.
We'll try to push for 2 weeks. All right.
Thank you.
And we'll reach out, this is Tessa, to coordinate a date. All right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Y'all have to
So,
go, Elon already got, oh no, there you are.
yeah, please get back to us on all 5 of our recommendations. Thank you, Brandy, for bringing up the subpoena. That is something you guys could do on your own. Kuehl's office could do that on your own. And the RFP and the pending or canceling, yeah, this got to be clinically based. I mean, if you want your constituents to say, all right, we're looking forward to the results of this study, because right now, nobody is.
Okay,
We have
we
no
understand.
confidence.
We understand.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this meeting. It was very informative. Thank you. We will be in touch very soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.